This wedding is an embarrassment. He said it with his hand on my shoulder. That's the part I need you to understand first. Not the words. The hand. It was resting there the way a man rests his hand on a podium, comfortable, arranged, composed for a photograph. Because there was a photographer, crouched 8 feet away in the hallway of a Legion Hall in Vandalia, Ohio, counting down from 3. So he leaned in, and he lowered his voice to a register I have only ever heard him use on the bench, and he set it into my hair like a blessing. 7:41 in the evening. I know because the clock over the coat rack at post 668 runs 4 minutes fast and has since 1998, and nobody has ever found the key to the case. The hallway smelled like floor wax and fryer oil. Somebody's kid had left a juice box on the radiator. I did not answer him. In my line of work, when a thing starts counting, you do not run. You lower your center of gravity, and you make your exhale longer than your inhale, and you decide what the thing is before you decide what to do about it. The photographer said, 1. My father laughed. I have a copy of that photograph. My smile in it is completely convincing, and it is the only thing about that night I am ashamed of. 11 minutes later, the double doors at the front of the hall opened. Cold October air came in off the parking lot, and everyone turned, because that is what you do at a wedding when a door opens. You look in case it's someone you love arriving late. It was a woman I had never seen. 62, maybe. Gray coat. A canvas tote held against her chest with both arms, the way you hold something you've been told not to drop. She let her eyes go across the room, table by table, unhurried. Then she asked the nearest person a question, and the nearest person pointed at me. She came halfway across the dance floor and stopped, because she did not want to come the rest of the way. I'm so sorry. I know the timing is unforgivable. Are you Juniper Vance? I said I was. She said, I've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. At 41 Wexler Road. 41 Wexler Road is my parents' house. I have not lived there in 11 years. But before I tell you what that woman was carrying, do me a favor. Write down the time where you are. Just the time. Nothing else. I'll tell you why at the end, and by then you'll be glad you wrote it down. Hit like and subscribe. Because 11 minutes after my father laughed for that camera, a stranger crossed that dance floor with a canvas tote, and before the night was over my own mother would ask me a 3-word question, and I would stand in front of 91 people and fail to answer it. But to understand how a stranger came to know my address better than my mother did, you have to go back 26 years. To a Tuesday morning. And a green Corolla. My name is Junie Vance. I'm 38 years old. For 11 years, my family has believed that I count equipment on a base in Nevada. I never corrected them. I want to be honest about that at the start, because a lot of what happened is my fault, and the part that is my fault is the part I still think about at 4 in the morning. Nobody lied to my parents. I simply let a small version of me stand where the real one should have been, and I called it manners. It was not manners. I was 12. It was a Tuesday, 20 past 7 in the morning, and I was at the kitchen window with a bowl of cereal when a green Corolla came through the stop sign at 3rd and Wexler and put a man on a bicycle over its hood. I saw the light. I saw the bicycle fold. I saw the man get up off the pavement and then sit back down on the curb, carefully, like he'd remembered he'd forgotten something. That evening, 2 officers came to our door and asked whether anyone in the house had been at the window. My father said, she was upstairs. I was standing on the stairs. He did not look at me. He said it the way you read out a docket number. The man who ran that stop sign was a contractor named Vernon Pratt, and my father had a matter in front of the zoning board that month, and it took me another 15 years to understand what those 2 facts had to do with each other. When the officers were gone, he closed the door the way he closed everything, properly with both hands, and he said, "Nothing happened." And then, nothing was written down. I went upstairs. I found a spiral notebook with a red cover. On the first page I wrote, Tuesday, 7:20 a.m. Green Corolla, 3rd and Wexler. The light was red. I was at the window. I hid it in a pillowcase. I never showed it to anyone. I never intended to. I needed it to exist somewhere in the world, in ink, because my father had just told me exactly how the world works, and I believed him completely. That is the whole of my childhood. Everything else is weather. I came home on leave for the first time at 25. I sat at my mother's table on a Sunday and tried to tell her one thing. Not the worst thing. Not even a bad thing, a small strange thing about a road outside Balad, and a boy who sold cigarettes out of a shoebox and saluted us with the wrong hand on purpose because it made us laugh. I got 4 sentences in. My mother stood up, carried her plate to the sink, and with her back to me she said, "I don't want to hear that, Junie." She wasn't cruel about it. That's what I need you to understand. She said it the way you'd tell someone the milk had turned. I finished my potatoes. I flew back. And then I found a format she couldn't refuse. You can buy postcards on any American installation on Earth. They're in a wire rack by the register at the PX, 40 for $6. And they are uniformly ugly. Sunsets over things. Camels. A cartoon eagle in sunglasses. I bought a stack. The front was whatever the picture was. I never chose. I took the top card off the pile. On the back, in block capitals, 3 lines. The coordinates. The date. And 1 word. Safe. That was it. No greeting. No signature. No love, Junie. No question. I did not mail them on a schedule. I mailed one afterward. Every time. That's the only pattern there ever was, and it is not a pattern you could see from Ohio. The first one went out from Balad in the spring of 2013. The last one from Al Udeed, in February of last year. 63 total. My mother never wrote back. Not a card. Not a call. Not a line at the bottom of a Christmas letter. I'd like to tell you I stopped expecting it. The truer sentence is that I never started, and that is a different kind of damage. It is quieter. It does not show up on any form. In March of 2019, I got a team leader named Marisol Ruiz. She was 5'1". She kept sunflower seeds in her cheek like a shortstop. Her laugh started as a cough. She had a daughter in El Paso whose school pictures were taped inside the lid of her tool case, all of them, every year, so that when she opened it, the kid grew up in front of her. There's a thing in our job that people outside it find romantic, and it is not romantic. It is arithmetic. When you cannot render a device safe from a distance, somebody puts on 90 pounds of Kevlar and ceramic plate and walks down the road to it, alone, and everyone else backs up to the minimum safe distance and stands very still and watches a person get smaller. We call it the long walk. Ruiz took the walk on the 3rd of November, 2019. I have her badge. Explosive ordnance disposal bronze, a wreath around a bomb. It came back warped. The wreath bent inward on the left side like something had leaned on it, and for 6 years it has lived in the left breast pocket of whatever I am wearing. My grandmother was named Alma Reeder, and she was the only person in that family who ever asked me a follow-up question. She died when I was 16. She left a trust. Not enormous by the standards of people who talk about trusts. Enormous by mine. At 16, I also walked into the Montgomery County Clerk of Courts with her death certificate and $11. And I changed my middle name from Anne to Reeder. My mother said it was a phase. My father signed the consent form without reading past the caption. Anne to Reeder. September of 2003. It comes back. In August, 7 weeks before the wedding, my bank called. A young man named Devante told me somebody had submitted a request to change the mailing address on my accounts, and that it had been flagged because the request came in on paper, and nobody submits things on paper anymore. I said I hadn't submitted anything. He said, "No problem. Ma'am, we'll leave it as is. Probably a scanning error." I hung up. I got a legal pad out of the drawer under the microwave, and I wrote, 15 Aug. 1,638 Hars. Unauthorized change of address request. Paper submission. Origin unknown. Declined. I wrote it down. Of course I did. I write everything down. It's the one thing my father ever really taught me, and he taught it very, very well. Legion Post 668 has a water stain on the ceiling shaped exactly like the state of Michigan. It appeared in 2004. The roof was fixed in 2005. The stain stayed. Cal booked the hall because his father runs the post. Cal Bissett. 43. Ironworker. Local 290. Runs a 200-ton crawler crane and has never dropped a load. Divorced. One kid, Nell, who was 9 that fall. He mends his own gear. Which is how I learned that a man who spends his life 200 feet in the air knows how to sew. The cake came from the Kroger on Northwoods. The girl in the bakery piped congratulations across it in blue. Cal looked at it with his hands in his pockets and said, "Nah. Leave it." I asked why. Because in 40 years that's the part we're gonna remember. And I don't want to remember us being the kind of people who sent a cake back. I wanted on the record that I knew exactly what I was getting. There was no secret. When I told my mother his profession over the phone, there was a pause on the line long enough for me to count to 4. He was not hiding anything. He never was. Everyone in my family assumed he was a step down. Nobody in my family asked what he was a step down from, because they thought they already knew. And what they thought they knew was that I count equipment on a base in Nevada. At the rehearsal dinner, my father did not take his coat off. 90 minutes. Catered ziti. And he sat at the end of the table in a charcoal overcoat with his hands folded like a man waiting on a connecting flight. He was pleasant. He asked Cal 2 questions about the crane and listened to neither answer. Denny Colbay has been the Vance family lawyer since I was in middle school. He was on his 2nd bourbon when he slid a folder across the tablecloth and said it was housekeeping. A prenuptial agreement. 4 pages. Nothing hostile in it. Cal picked it up. Here's the thing about crane operators. They read everything. All of it. Every time. Because when you're swinging 40,000 pounds over a street with people on it, the load chart is not a suggestion and the wind is not an opinion. And men who skim are men who eventually kill somebody. He read that agreement the way he reads a load chart, finger under the line. He got 4 inches down the first page and stopped. He turned it around and put it in front of me. "That's not your name." I said, "Where?" He put his finger on it and read it out loud, 1 letter at a time, the way he'd read a serial number off a shackle. Juniper. A. Vance, he looked up. "You're R." Denny laughed and said his girl must have pulled it off an old file. He took out a pen and initialed the correction right there, and everybody went back to the ZD. Nobody at that table thought about it for 1 more second. I thought about it for a year. Because for a document drafted last month to say Juniper A. Vance, somebody had to be working from paper that predates my 16th birthday. Somebody in that office had my name pulled from a file that had been sitting there since I was a child. And if you build the legal portrait of a person out of documents that stop when she's 15, then in that file she never enlisted. She never changed her name. She never turned 17. She's still a child. That's what the file says. And the file is all a court gets. I found my mother in the kitchen afterward, drying plates that were already dry. The Legion has a dishwasher. There is nothing that woman will not do rather than sit down in a room. I picked up a towel and stood next to her and said, as lightly as I have ever said anything in my life, "Hey, do you still have the postcards?" She didn't look up. "Oh, those got lost in the move. They moved in 2011. From 41 Wexler Road to 41 Wexler Road. They added a sunroom and lived in the basement for 5 months. And my mother has always called that the move. And I have always let her." I said, "Right." And while I dried the next plate, I looked at the spice rack over her stove. Allspice. Basil. Bay leaf. Cardamom. Cayenne. Celery seed. Cinnamon. Cloves. Coriander. Cumin. Alphabetical. 31 years my mother worked as a title examiner. 31 years in a windowless room at a county recorder's office, comparing one signature against another and deciding, on behalf of the state of Ohio, whether a person's name meant what it appeared to mean. She has never lost anything in her life. I put the plate on the stack. I said goodnight. I went out the side door and stood in the parking lot with both hands flat on the roof of a Chevy Malibu until I could feel my own heartbeat again, and I did not cry, and I would like to tell you that was strength. It wasn't. I just didn't have the paperwork yet. The morning of the wedding, 7 a.m., Cal's daughter took me to the Waffle House on Northwoods, because she said I was doing the thing with my face. Nell Bissett. 9. 2 missing teeth, 1 growing back crooked, extremely proud of it. She'd been rehearsing a dance for 6 weeks, the two of us, to a song she picked herself, a country song about a truck, and I did not have the heart to tell her I found it unbearable. She got me up between the counter and the jock box on that vinyl tile at 7 in the morning, while a man in a Carhartt ate his eggs and never once looked over. 1, 2, 3, she said. 1, 2, 3. I counted. I always count. Counting is not a symptom. It is a job requirement. On a device you count your breaths and your steps and the seconds between the first click and the second click. And I have counted my way out of 9 things that other people built to kill me. Nell stopped and put her hands on her hips. "You're counting wrong." I said I didn't think so. "You're saying the number when your foot's still up in the air." She stamped, once hard enough to rattle a salt shaker. "You count when it lands." Cal sewed a pocket into my grandmother's wedding dress. It was Alma's. Ivory. There was no pocket. Dresses from 1,961 don't have them. I asked him if he could put one in the left seam, and he said sure, and he did it at the kitchen table with a needle and heavy thread, tongue between his teeth, and he never asked me what I needed a pocket for. That's the whole man. I don't have a better story about him, and I don't need one. I put Ruiz's badge in it. At 4 in the afternoon, I opened the trunk of my rental car and put a manila folder inside it. Deployment orders. My DD 214. 2 commendations. A letter from a colonel. A photo of 9 of us on a HESCO barrier in Djibouti in which everybody is squinting. I was not going to use it. Nobody at that reception was going to see 1 page of it. In 11 years, I have never once put a document in front of my family and said, "Look." I just couldn't figure out how to leave my own house without proof that I existed. 7:41 in the evening. The hallway. The floor wax. The juice box. My father put his hand on my shoulder and told me my wedding was an embarrassment, and then he laughed for the camera and walked out into the hall and picked up a microphone. He gave a beautiful toast. 2 minutes and 10 seconds. He said his daughter had always known her own mind. He said Cal was a man who built things with his hands, and that this country was starving for more of them. He got the room. 91 people, and he got every one of them. And my mother sat at the head table with her hands in her lap and watched him do it, and her face was the face of a woman watching a surgery. He was not lying, exactly. That's the thing about him people never understand. He needed to be at that wedding. He needed there to be a wedding. and then the double doors opened, and a woman in a gray coat came in out of the cold with a canvas tote held against her chest with both arms. She said her name was Ruth Bledsoe, and she apologized 3 times before she finished her first sentence. "I'm so sorry." "Ma'am, I know what today is." I tried very hard not to do it this way. I asked her what she did. She said, "When somebody asks a court to take control of another person, the court sends me out to go find that person and look at her with my own eyes." Then she told me the job title, and it meant nothing to me, and it means nothing to most people. Court investigator. Montgomery County probate. $440 a case, 4 or 5 cases a month, 18 years. A Corolla with 240,000 miles on it, parked crooked between an F-150 and the dumpster. Airman Toomey, 24 and 3 bourbons past his own judgment, had started crying at the end of the bar, the way the young ones do at weddings when they've been to more funerals than weddings. Ruth Bledsoe took a granola bar out of her tote, put it on the bar in front of him without breaking stride, said, "Eat that, sweetheart," and kept walking toward me. She carries them because the interviews run long and the people she interviews are usually hungry. That is who came for me. Not an admiral. Not a general. Not a man in a dark suit with a badge on his belt. A 62-year-old woman with a granola bar. We sat at table 9. Cal's cousins picked up their drinks and went to stand by the coat rack, under the clock that runs 4 minutes fast. She took out a folder, not a briefcase. A folder, the kind with a rubber band around it, and she read me the caption. In the matter of the guardianship of the person and the estate of Juniper, she stopped. Checked it. Read it again. A. Vance. A. 16 hours after Cal read those same 2 letters off a prenup at a rehearsal dinner, a stranger read them off the front page of a petition to take my life away from me. In that file I had never enlisted. I had never changed my name. I had never turned 17. Petitioners are LSM. Vance and Corinne A. Vance, Ruth said. Hearing's the 21st. I didn't say anything. I counted the room instead. It's what I do. 91, if you counted the DJ, and the DJ was leaning on his laptop watching us, because he couldn't hear anything and he could see everything. Ruth said, "I want to make sure you understand what's being asked for." And then she did not use a single legal word. Somebody signs your name for you. Somebody holds your money. Somebody decides where you live. Whether you can drive. Whether you can consent to a surgery. Whether you can be married. She let that sit. That's guardianship of the person and the estate, she said. That's what they filed. 17 days after my wedding, an Ohio judge was scheduled to decide whether I was a person. Did you know about any of this? I said no. Ruth closed her eyes for about a second and a half. I was afraid of that. She turned the folder around on the paper tablecloth so I could see. Notice went certified to 41 Wexler Road. Somebody signed for it. I looked at the green card. There's a signature on the back of a certified mail receipt, and my mother examined signatures for the county for 31 years, and I know hers the way I know my own handwriting. I went out to Wexler twice, Ruth said. Nobody home. I left cards. My job is to interview you, ma'am. Not to interview them. I asked her how she found me. Ruth Bledsoe looked at me across a table with a plastic centerpiece on it and said, "Your mother put the announcement in the Dayton Daily News." For appearances. Of course she did. Vandalia, the Vance Bissett wedding, October the 4th. Legion Post 668, 6 o'clock reception to follow. The lie about where I lived ran in the same newspaper as the truth about where I would be. They summoned her. She read me paragraph 9. I'll give it to you exactly. I have read it 300 times. Affiant states that her daughter has been under Affiant's direct care and observation in Affiant's home for extended periods. including from November 2019 through January 2020, during which time she exhibited paranoid ideation, compulsive counting behaviors, and an inability to manage her own affairs. Affiant further states that her daughter has never communicated with affiant or affiant's spouse in writing. Sworn. Notarized. Signed by Corinne A. Vance. My father drafted it. I know his sentences. Affiant further states. He has written that phrase 10,000 times and he cannot stop. He drafted it. She swore to it. A judge knows exactly where to stand. I said, I have my orders in the car. I heard myself say it. 38 years old, in my grandmother's dress, at my own wedding, and my first instinct was to go out to the parking lot and get the folder. Ruth Bledsoe put her hand up. Ma'am, I don't need your orders. So I reached into the pocket Cal had sewn into a dress from 1961, past a warped bronze badge, and took out a piece of yellow legal paper I had folded into eighths 7 weeks earlier and never mentioned to a living soul. I set it on the tablecloth and turned it around so she could read it. 15 Aug. 1,638 Hars. Unauthorized change of address request. Paper submission. Origin unknown. Declined. Ruth read it twice. Then she said it to nobody. The way you say a thing you have understood only this second. They practiced. And she reached into the canvas tote and lifted out a shoebox. Nike. Women's, size 8. The lid held on with a rubber band gone chalky. I signed this out of the clerk's office Thursday, she said. It has to be back Monday. I'm required to review the petitioner's evidence with you. That's the statute, and I'm glad of it, because I have been carrying this thing around in my car for 2 days, and it has been bothering me, and I could not tell you why. 63 postcards. In clear plastic sleeves. Face up. A paralegal in Denny Colby's office had put each one in its own sleeve, in order, image side out, and run a label through a printer and stuck it on the lid. Exhibit A. Items 1 through 63. Obsessive correspondence. Undite. A sunset over an oil derrick. A camel. A cartoon eagle in sunglasses. A tank in front of a mountain range at dusk with greetings from in a font from 1974. My mother had them. She had every one of them. In a shoebox. In a closet. For 11 years. They did not get lost in the move. She kept them, and she carried the box to Denny Colby's office in a paper bag, and Denny handed it to a girl named Ashley, and Ashley sleeved them face up and typed a label from what she could see. Not one of them turned a single card over. Not the paralegal. Not the lawyer. Not the judge who drafted the affidavit. Not the woman who swore to it, who had been in physical possession of them for over a decade. Nobody turned them over. I have to ask you to confirm the handwriting, Ruth said. That means I have to look at the back. She slid the first card out of its sleeve. She turned it over. She was quiet a moment. Then, in an entirely different voice, the voice of someone who has just realized the room she is standing in is not the room she thought. They're dated. She read the postmark aloud, slowly, checking it. The way you read a serial number. 18 April, 2013. A POAE, 09391. Balad. She set it down and took out the next. 2nd of June, 2013. 09354. Bagram. She did not stop. I want you to understand that no one in that room was performing. She just kept taking them out and turning them over and reading them, one after another, in a flat, clear voice, because 18 years had taught her that when the paper contradicts the affidavit, you read the paper into the record. Balad. Bagram. Kandahar. Camp Lemonnier. Al Udeid. Bagram. Kandahar. Bagram. 63 postmarks. Not one of them from Ohio. And at the bottom of paragraph 9, in my father's sentences, sworn to by my mother. Her daughter has never communicated with affiant or affiant's spouse in writing. They attached the disproof to their own petition. They labeled it. They carried it into a courthouse and handed it to a clerk. Because to them it wasn't writing. It was one word, 63 times, from a woman they had already decided was ill. "Ma'am," Ruth said, "I'm going to read all 63 of these into my report." My father stood up and reached across the table for the folder. Ruth put her hand flat on it. She is 62 years old and she has no rank of any kind, and she left her hand exactly where it was. "Judge," she said, "I'd rather you didn't." He looked at me. I have thought about what I said next every day for 14 months. I did not raise my voice. I did not stand up. 91 people heard it, and 89 of them had no idea what it meant. I said. I was at the window. My father sat down in a folding chair at his daughter's wedding, and he did not get up again. And then Cal. He'd been standing behind my chair the whole time with his hand flat on the back of it, not touching me, reading over Ruth's shoulder, finger under the line, the way he reads everything. He was looking at the word. He said it to nobody, in the voice of a man who has just solved something. "It's not about her." The room did not understand him. "It's about the bomb," he said. "She's not telling you she's okay. She's telling you it didn't go off." 63 postcards. 63 devices. 63 days when nobody's mother had to open a door and find 2 officers on her porch with their hats in their hands. Cal stopped. He'd heard himself. And he turned and looked at me, and I watched him do the arithmetic that I had somehow never done in 11 years. My mother said, very quietly, "From the head table." Safe from what? She wasn't being cruel. She wanted to know. She had no way of knowing. I never told her. I had mailed 63 reports home in a language whose only key I kept in my own pocket, and I had called it manners. And now a woman who had swindled me out of my own legal personhood was asking me a fair question, and I could not answer it. Nobody answered it. Across the hall, the DJ who could see everything and hear nothing, who had watched a woman in a gray coat read index cards for 11 minutes and concluded that whatever this was, it was over, leaned down to his laptop and started the first dance. The country song. About the truck. Nell Bissett stood up in her green dress and put her hands out and looked for me. Ambrose Bissett, 71, crossed that floor faster than a man his age should be able to, reached behind the speaker, and pulled the plug out of the wall. The hearing was on the 21st of October, and it lasted 6 minutes. Ruth Bledsoe filed her report on the 9th. 4 pages, single-spaced, in the plainest English I have ever seen a professional use. Paragraph 2 of page 3 reads, "The court investigator is unable to reconcile the sworn statements of the petitioners with petitioner's own Exhibit A." That's the whole knife. Judge Ostrander denied the petition and referred the file to the county prosecutor. People always want the money explained, so here it is. My grandmother's trust had an incapacity clause, the way they all do. If a court of competent jurisdiction ever found Juniper incapacitated, the successor trustees would be Ellis and Corinne Vance. Alma Reader wrote that in 1998 to protect a granddaughter from a car accident. My father had borrowed against the house to lend money to his own campaign. He needed money. There was money. And there was a door my grandmother had left unlocked, by accident, 27 years earlier. That's it. That's the mechanism, and it took me 3 sentences, and it is the least true thing in this story. Because here's what I actually believe. My father needed me to be sick. Think about it from inside his skull for 1 second. If his daughter is well, if she is a competent adult who spent 11 years walking down roads toward things built to kill her, And mailing home a one-word report then, what were the 11 years of silence? What was the phone that never rang? What is a man who did not know his own child's job? If she is sick, all of it becomes care. All of it becomes concern. He gets to have been a father the entire time. A judge does not decide a fact because it is true. He decides it because the alternative cannot be permitted to stand. 3 days after the wedding, I sat at Cal's kitchen table with a copy of the petition and read paragraph 9 again, alone. From November 2019 through January 2020. And then I did something nobody in that Legion Hall had done, because nobody in that Legion Hall knew enough to do it. I got Ruth's report. She had listed all 63 postmarks, in order by date, the way she said she would. Number 43. 1st of November, 2019. Bagram. Number 44. 19th of January, 2020. Bagram. 11 weeks. Ruiz took the long walk on the 3rd of November. I reached into my jacket and took out a warped bronze badge and set it on the table next to a court document, and I sat there for a while. Here is what I understood that night, and it is not the thing you think. The postmarks did not prove I was overseas that winter. There are no postmarks that winter. That's the point. 11 weeks, and I did not write, because I could not. Because a woman who kept her daughter's school pictures taped inside a tool case had walked down a road and not come back, and I did not have a word for that. And the only word I owned was safe, and it wasn't. A halfway competent lawyer would have stood up in that courtroom and said his client's daughter flew home to Ohio on the 5th of November and returned to theater in mid-January, and pointed at 11 weeks of absolute silence in the record, and dared anyone to prove otherwise. What killed the petition was the other sentence. The throwaway one. Her daughter has never communicated with a fiant or affiant spouse in writing. My father didn't need that sentence. Nobody asked him for it. He put it in because he has been writing affiant further states for 40 years, and he cannot stop. And it is the one place in 4 pages where he wrote something he had not personally verified. I did not win because I was right. I won because my father could not stop writing. And my mother. My mother never read a single card. 11 years, face up in a shoebox, and not one of them turned over. But she watched the mail. She has watched the mail every day of her adult life. 31 years of it. Certified. Registered. Return receipt requested. She knew there were 63 because she counted the envelopes as they came. And she knew the way you know a sound has stopped in a house exactly when they stopped. Of all the dates in 11 years of my life, she could give a court exactly one window with any confidence. She gave them the one where nothing came. She built the lie inside the shape of my grief. Not because she knew what the grief was. She never asked, and she was never told. She only knew the shape of it, from the outside, by the absence of postmarks in a drawer she was not reading. 11 weeks of nothing was the only true thing I ever mailed home. And it is the only thing she ever received. 7 weeks before all of this, somebody in Ohio filed a piece of paper trying to move my mailing address to 41 Wexler Road. A young man named Devante called it a scanning error. It was a rehearsal. The referral was for perjury. Perjury requires a sworn statement. My father drafted every word of that affidavit. I can prove it with a comma, but he did not sign it. And he did not raise his right hand in front of a notary in the lobby of a title company on a Wednesday afternoon. My mother did. The prosecutor's office named one person, and it was not the judge. He resigned from the bench 11 days later, before disciplinary counsel could file anything, citing a desire to spend more time with his family. The Dayton Daily News ran it on page 6. 3 sentences, below a story about a water main. That's what the end of a 30-year career looks like in the county where you were born. I did not ask them to charge her. I did not ask them not to. I let it run. I have said that sentence to myself several hundred times, and I still don't know whether it's justice. or just the cheapest way for my father to win one more time because he drafted it. And she swore to it. And he will be at her sentencing in a charcoal overcoat with his hands folded. And everyone will say what a hard year that man has had. I don't have the end of that thought. I've been honest with you the whole way, and I'm not going to invent one now. I mailed 63 postcards home, and I never once wrote right back. I never wrote I miss you. I never wrote please. I never asked a question, because a question is a request, and a request can be denied. And I learned at 12 years old at a kitchen window that in my family the only thing that survives is what gets written down. So I sent reports. I built a record of my own existence and mailed it, in installments, to 2 people who never opened the file. Then I stood at a sink and dried a dry plate and called it manners. You cannot document your way into being loved. I have 63 receipts. A 9-year-old told me I was counting wrong. She said I was saying the number while my foot was still in the air. I've counted every step toward every device I ever walked to. I counted my breaths, and I counted the seconds between clicks, and I counted 91 people in a room while a stranger explained that a court was going to decide whether I was a person. I never once counted the part where my foot comes down. That's the part where nothing is happening. That is the part you are supposed to live in. We live outside Las Vegas now. Cal runs a crawler crane on a hospital expansion off Sunset Road. Up at 4:30, asleep by 9. Nell is 10. The tooth grew in crooked exactly as promised, and she is still proud of it. Nell and I never danced. You want to know what it cost, and everyone expects the answer to be the money, or the house on Wexler Road, or a mother, and none of those, because I never had the last one and I never wanted the first 2. She rehearsed for 6 weeks. She picked the song off a jukebox at a Waffle House and made me practice between the counter and the register while a man in a Carhartt ate his eggs. And she taught me when to count. Ambrose pulled that plug because he loved his granddaughter, and because he understood faster than anyone in the room that whatever was happening at table 9, a child should not have to dance through the middle of it. He was right. I'd have done the same. For about 4 months afterwards, she'd ask. Not pushy. We could do it in the kitchen. And I'd say, yeah, this weekend. And then it would be Thursday again. She stopped asking around month 9. That song comes on the radio out here maybe once a week. When it does, I hear a folding chair drag across a tile floor. I haven't found a way to make that stop, and I've stopped assuming I will. You don't get everything back. Anyone who tells you that you do is selling you something. My mother called once. In March. She did not apologize. I want to be precise about that, because I've heard 100 versions of this story where the mother weeps into the phone, and mine did not, and I've come to believe mine was the more honest woman. She said there were 63. Not a question. A number. 31 years verifying instruments for the county, and she gave me the count the way she'd give a filing date. I didn't say anything. She said, I never turn them over. I said, I know. And then there was a long stretch of nothing on the line, and I could hear her furnace kick on 1,800 miles away, and finally my mother said the only true thing I have ever heard her say. I didn't want to know if you'd asked me for anything. I set the phone down on the counter, gently the way Ruth Bledsoe set down a postcard. She was right to be afraid. Not because there was a request on the back of one of those cards. Because there wasn't. 11 years. 63 times. And her daughter never asked her for a single thing. And never told her a single thing. And mailed her a code with the key removed. And then stood in a Legion Hall and could not answer the one question she finally thought to ask. She never asked it again. Ruth Bledsoe went on to her next case. She had 4 more that month. I sent her a card. Not a postcard, a proper one, in an envelope, with a stamp I put on myself. She never wrote back, and I want to say that's fine, and it is fine, and I noticed. There is one more. 64. I bought it at the PX at Nellis on a Tuesday in April. Off the top of the pile. No choosing. It's a photograph of the Las Vegas Strip at night, and it is genuinely hideous. I addressed it to Camila Ruiz, in El Paso, Texas. She's 15 now. She grew up one school picture at a time on the inside of a tool case in a shop bay in Kandahar, and every one of us knew her face before we knew her name. Into the envelope, wrapped in a paper towel, I put a bronze badge with the wreath bent inward on the left side. And on the back of the card, in block capitals, I did not write coordinates, and I did not write a date, and I did not write safe. Because it wasn't. And Camila has known that for 6 years and does not need a postcard to tell her. I wrote 3 words. I was there. I know my mother's address. I have always known my mother's address. That was never the problem. She had 63 of me in a shoebox, face up, for 11 years. I am not a file. I was never a file, not hers, not a court's, not anybody's, and I am done being kept. So if there's a box in your closet with somebody's name on it, turn it over. Do it while they can still watch you do it. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this one. It took 14 months and a stranger in a gray coat for me to understand that I had spent my whole adult life mailing evidence to people who were never going to open it, and calling that love. So let me ask you something, and take your time. Have you ever sent something for years to somebody who never once turned it over? Have you ever let people believe a smaller version of you, because correcting them would have felt like bragging? And if there's a box in somebody's closet with your name on it, is it there because they kept you, or because throwing it away would have meant admitting they received it? Now look at the time you wrote down at the beginning. It's the only thing I asked you for all night, and you wrote it down, and you didn't ask me why. That is exactly what I did. 63 times. For 11 years. Somebody should have asked me why. If any of that landed, type turn it over in the comments. I read them. All of them. It's what I do now instead of the other thing. If this story reached you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you. Take care of yourself. Count when your foot lands. I'll see you in the next one.